Hi again, everyone. Thank you for coming to this week's Inspira University about the Pilgrims. I apologize for not being there with you in person, but I'll be back soon. On the table should be printouts of recipes that date back to the Pilgrim times. On the front are recipes from books made in the 1600s. On the back is a summary of what the dish most likely was and the ingredients used in it. I hope you enjoy taking a look into the past of how their diet seemed to be. Like I said last week, I like to add a bit of trivia into our discussions, and while I usually offer a prize for the correct answer, today your prize for answering correctly will be bragging rights. To start today's topic, our first trivia question is, what is a pilgrim? I'll give you a few seconds to answer. The answer is a person who goes on a long journey, often with religious or moral purpose. The word pilgrim seemed to have come about from a writer in 1622 who referred to the Plymouth colonists as pilgrims. Pilgrim became the term applied to all of the Mayflower passengers, and even to the other people arriving in Plymouth in those early years. So who were the Pilgrims? The Pilgrims originated from England. In 1534, King Henry VIII declared himself the head of a new national church, the Church of England. Although King Henry VIII changed some things that made the Church of England different from the Roman Catholic Church, a few people felt that the new church retained too many practices of the Roman Church. This created two groups of people. Those who wanted to purify the church came to be known as the Puritans, and another group, which were considered very radical and believed the new Church of England was beyond reform, were called Separatists, and demanded the formation of new separate church congregations. Back in the 1600s, it was illegal to be part of any church other than the Church of England, so the separatist way of thinking was quite dangerous, so they chose to flee to the Dutch Netherlands. In the Netherlands, they could practice their own religion without fear or persecution from the English government or its church. The separatists left behind their homeland and friends to live in a foreign country. Although they had religious freedom, it didn't prove to be easy. They remained in the Netherlands for 12 years, but it required hard work. Some of their young children had to work, and some older children ended up leaving to become soldiers or sailors. Soon parents were afraid that they were losing their identity as English people, and there was talk of war happening between the Dutch and Spanish, so they chose to move again. Here's another trivia question. True or false? The Mayflower was the only ship involved in their departure to America. It is false. The congregation also purchased a small ship named the Speedwell. The Speedwell was meant to transport them across the sea and to use for fishing and trading in America. They ended up having to turn back to England twice because the Speedwell leaked and they were forced to leave the ship. After the Netherlands, there was the Pilgrims' move to America. The congregation decided to leave Holland to establish a farming village in the Virginia colony. Because they didn't have enough money to establish their village on their own, they had to enter into an agreement with financial investors. The company of investors would provide passage for the colonists and supply them with tools, clothing, and other supplies. In turn, the colonists would work for the company, sending natural resources such as fish, timber, and furs back to England. All assets, including the land and Pilgrims' houses, would belong to the company until the end of 7 years, when all of it would be divided among each of the investors and colonists. With the help of the investors, the Pilgrims set out for America on September 6, 1620 on the Mayflower with 102 passengers. The first half of the voyage was smooth with sunny skies and fair weather. The only major problem was seasickness. By October, they began encountering a number of Atlantic storms that made the voyage treacherous. They did not know then what we know today, which is that the peak of the Atlantic hurricane season happens to be through the months of August to October. After a voyage of 66 days, the Mayflower arrived in New England on November 11, 1620. Here is a picture of the route that the Mayflower took. The blue line shows their planned route, and the red dotted line shows the actual route the Mayflower ended up taking. They landed roughly 600 miles north of where they originally planned due to storms blowing them off course. They originally intended to settle near the Hudson River in New York, but dangerous conditions forced the ship to seek shelter at Cape Cod. It was late in the year, and traveling around Cape Cod as they originally planned was proving to be difficult, so they decided to remain in New England. When the Pilgrims left England, they obtained permission from the King of England to settle on land farther to the south near the mouth of the Hudson River. Because they chose to remain where they landed, they needed a new permission, called a patent, to settle there. Upon their arrival and needing to maintain order and establish a civil society, while they waited for this new patent, the adult male passengers signed the Mayflower Compact. The significance of the document was that it was the first governing document of Plymouth Colony, and the first time English colonists established a community based on their own definitions. The compact declared that the colonists would be loyal to the King of England, make just laws, and work together for the good of the colony. After several weeks, they found an abandoned Wampanoag community. It was a favorable place for settlement. The plentiful water supply, good harbor, cleared fields, and location on a hill made it favorable. While their houses were being built, the group continued to live on the ship. Due to this, many of the colonists fell ill. They were most likely suffering from scurvy and pneumonia caused by a lack of shelter in the cold, wet weather. The Pilgrims were not starving, but their sea diet was very high in salt, which weakened their bodies on the long journey and during their first winter. Only 52 people survived the first year in Plymouth. While the Pilgrims built their town, they occasionally caught glimpses of native people, but it wasn't until 4 months after their arrival that the colonists met and communicated with them. An English-speaking Abenaki named Samoset helped the colonists form an alliance with the local Wampanoags, who taught them how to hunt local animals, gather shellfish, and grow corn, beans, and squash. In March 1621, the colonists made a treaty of mutual protection with the Pokanoket Wampanoag leader, Wasequim, also known as Massasoit. The points of the treaty were, number 1, neither party would harm the other. Number 2, if anything was stolen, it would be returned and the offending person would return to his own people for punishment. Number 3, both sides agreed to leave their weapons behind when meeting. And number 4, the two groups would serve as allies in times of war. In the fall of 1621, the colonists marked their first harvest with a 3-day celebration. Massasoit and 90 of his men joined the English for feasting and entertainment. In the 1800s, this famous celebration became basis for the story of the first Thanksgiving. To end today's talk, here are a couple of riddles that came from the Pilgrims. What is full all day and empty at night? Shoes. What is higher than a house and yet seems smaller than a mouse? A star. Well, that's it for today's talk about Pilgrims. I hope you all enjoyed it and gained some new knowledge today. Thank you for coming, and I hope you'll join me for the next Inspira University.